Welcome to Outside of the Classroom. Education is important, but not that bullshit, abstract, and theoretical education. You want useful, relevant, and actionable lessons that will help you succeed in life. So that's what we do. It's your boy Hung Pham, your host, and now let's hack your education together. Welcome to Outside of the Classroom. Today we have Hung Pham, author of Start Over, Let Go of the Past, Embrace Yourself, and Change Your Life. He is also the founder of Culture Summit and one of my good friends and mentors. Hung, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tam. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here today.
I'm so excited. Hung, how did we meet again? Was it online or was it through a networking event?
So I had been writing some blog posts as well as promoting on LinkedIn when I was promoting when I was producing the Culture Summit.
Mm-hmm.
And I had wrote a blog post about why I was producing it, starting with your why, and you had liked it and put a comment on it. And so I was curious who this guy was. So I clicked on your LinkedIn profile, saw that you were such a hustler, such a humble person, and had reached out to you to invite you to come either attend, volunteer. And I really just wanted to meet you and be friends. And then from there, we just started to kind of share information back and forth. And here we are today.
That's awesome. I don't actually remember commenting, so thanks for bringing that up. And yeah, for those listening, Hung helped me. He's an author of two other books or one other. How many books do you have now?
I have three total.
Okay.
Two other books.
Okay, so two other books, and he's helped me launch my book, and it became a bestseller on Amazon. So Hung is the real deal. He's a great writer, great storyteller, and I'm really glad for him today to share his story. But Hung, for those tuning in and who are not familiar with you, your work, and Culture Summit, could you just give the audience just a brief background of who you are and what you're up to?
Sure. So I've been working in Silicon Valley most of my career. So I would say about 10 years already. Started off as a developer, wasn't a great developer, so I just moved into the business side of the business. But at that time, I was probably 25, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And a lot of it, I just spent years working either because the job paid well or it had a nice title. But every day I came into work just frustrated that I wasn't passionate with what I was doing. And when I woke up, I couldn't find any real meaning to what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2012, I started to do more outside of work. I wanted to really experience life. And so I attended hackathons, and I just really got involved in the startup ecosystem. And I attended an event called Lean Startup Machine, and I won that event in 2012.
Sweet.
And the platform we built in that weekend went on to raise $750,000. And so that experience taught me at least I can try to be an entrepreneur, right? I don't know if I'm going to be successful, but I can try to do it. I have the confidence to try.
Wait, how old were you in 2012? When was this?
In 2012, I was 32.
Wow.
Yeah, so imagine 10 years of working and trying to climb that corporate ladder, and you just get really stuck at what you're doing, right? You just hate the rest. You hate how your life looks at the moment, and you can't imagine that's how it's going to be for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. So I started to get more involved outside of work. I did the hackathon. I loved the experience so much. I signed up to organize and teach other entrepreneurs lean startup here in San Francisco. So for 3 years, I organized and taught hundreds of entrepreneurs. And just last year, I decided to leave the lean startup workshops, and I wanted to produce my own conference. And culture has always been something I've been passionate about. I had a poor experience early on in my career, so that's why I really wanted to, bring the focus back to culture. And a lot of events I saw in that space were very HR-ish, they're very corporate-ish, and I wanted something that spoke to the millennials, people like myself who really, just wanted to get to the heart of it. And so I decided I'm going to be the first one to do it, and that's how I became the founder of Culture Summit.
That's awesome. But it's just crazy because at 32, people in college right now, they're like, oh, I should have started businesses and learning how to code when I was 9 years old. You just proved that at 32, it's never too late to start anything.
Yeah, definitely. When I graduated in 2004, that was right before mobile, and social. So when I had a technical degree, I didn't have like the opportunities to do something fun, right? When I came out of college and I was a developer, my job was mainly fixing bugs all day, which I hated. And looking back now, I wish I kind of stuck with it, so I would have those skills to build more products. But again, you don't have to think that you have. I mean, you don't have to feel like you have to get accomplished by a certain age. You can always go back and redo things, or you can always take everything you've learned from the past and then start a new journey, like I did.
Hmm. And that just folds through with your new book, Start Over, Let Go of the Past, Embrace Yourself, and Change Your Life. I've read the first half, and I'm just so amazed at your story. So can we just take a step back and go back to the college days? I know you were studying like tech, but I guess growing up in college, what was going on, and what hardships did you face through that experience?
So I would say a lot of hardships that I experienced were self-inflicted. So it's I didn't have. I mean, I had a good upbringing. We were middle class, and my parents, like any other Asian parents, wanted their son to go into medical field. So in high school, I studied my butt off. I did all the things that you're supposed to do: get good grades, be involved in lots of activities and clubs. And my senior year, I had got into a breakup with my girlfriend, and that whole experience just tore me apart because it was my first relationship, first love. And
Mhm. And how long was this relationship?
so I was with her for 2 years, so from my sophomore year to my senior year. And that year, I kind of just gave up in school. I studied pretty well. I mean, I got like a 3.5 GPA overall, but like before that, I was 4.0 student, right? So, um, and the worst part is I wanted to go to a better college. I had always envisioned going to Berkeley, like my dream school. But because I went through the breakup and I was so traumatized, I didn't want to leave home. I just felt like if I left home, I didn't have the support of my family and my friends. And so rather than go to Berkeley, I went to a local college. I stayed local.
Mhm.
So I went to San Francisco State University, and that first semester, I remember being on campus and I couldn't accept myself. I couldn't accept the fact that I had studied and gotten all these good grades and accolades, and here I was at the state university. So that first semester, completely checked out, got a 1.8 GPA, lost my scholarship. I almost got kicked out of school on academic probation, and that was a reality check for me. At that point, I felt like I'd never failed in life, right? So when you get to that point and nothing goes right, it's like a reality check to yourself saying, hey, you may be smart, but you're not immune, right? You're
Mhm.
capable of fucking up, and now you gotta, you know, reset yourself and get back on it. So
Wow.
that was
Oh,
college.
1.8.
1.8. That's funny.
Mhm.
So I was at San Francisco State, and I moved back home after that semester. I transferred to San Jose State, and the toughest part, I think, moving home was that I didn't know how to talk to my parents about it because my dad was just so used to me being an overachiever. And I remember one night I wanted to share with him what I was going through because I didn't know how to deal with it. And I remember telling my dad everything I was going through. So the breakup, um, being kicked out of school, bad grades. And he looked at me, and the first thing he said to me was, all these years I thought you were special, and now I realize you're not. And when I heard that, it tore me apart because I had my dad was like my biggest inspiration for doing so well in school, and to hear him not just even try to understand, but just talk to me like I was such a failure, that really
Mhm.
changed how I looked at my career and how I looked at school and life from there on out. Because for a long time I was really resentful of my parents, especially my dad, and we wouldn't talk. And
Because of that one moment.
because that one moment, it's funny, like when you're 18, just that one moment. And here I am at 35 today, and I still talk about it, right? It's just that one defining moment where he made me feel like I was on my own. And that's why I approached everything going forward. Like I was going to do this for myself. Whether or not people, cared or not, it was going to be for myself.
Wow. So you went to high school, didn't get into your dream school, but you went to your local university, got a 1.8, got kicked out of college, and now your dad's telling you that this tragic, realization for him. I guess I guess after that conversation, what did you do after? Like the day after, the week after? Like how did you live your life after that?
So I don't remember what I did like right afterwards. I just knew that going forward, everything I did, I had to do it for myself, right?
Okay.
So it was no longer trying to get my dad's approval or acceptance. I didn't care about that anymore. So that really got me into this hustler mentality. So I was a biology major, but I hated biology and I didn't want to be a doctor. And at that time, this is like probably in 2000, actually in 99. So this is when the first boom happened. Tech was like really popular. I didn't know what computer science was, but a friend had suggested it to me to try it out. So I took a class, and I remember writing my first program. Just simply said, like a line of code that said "Hello World," and the fact that you can write code and it does something, that was so fascinating. So I majored in computer science, and I always wanted to try to get ahead of everyone else, right? So one thing I did while I was in school was I was trying to find internships. So I was 19 years old. I didn't want to just rely on school to be my learning experience. I was trying to find internships at the same time. So I would hustle and I landed some pretty big internships while in college. So I worked at Cisco, which was like one of the biggest companies during that time. I also worked at Sun as an intern throughout college, another big company. So I kind of got that drive to just be better than everyone else because of that experience.
Got it. And do you think, well, looking back, I guess, like, do you think that experience, like, without that experience, you probably wouldn't have had that drive to do the internships? Is that
Yeah,
right? Or
yeah. Well, I don't know if for sure. I can't say like with or without. I just know
Mhm.
that up until that point, I had never experienced failure, right? And
Got
sometimes
it.
when you go through tough times in your life, it defines who you are based on how you respond to it. So you can either rise up to the occasion and power through it, or you can kind of crumble under whatever negativity it creates for you.
Hmm. Okay, cool. So after going through those internships and after eventually graduating college, I guess what was that next step for you post graduation?
Well, here's another story during college. So I had met another girl in college my last 2 years. So she ended up being my girlfriend, and so this girl was at that time I thought someone I was going to marry. We had both studied computer science. On paper, it looked like the perfect couple. And so when we graduated, I went on to work full time at Sun Microsystems. I was an engineer, and we went through a tough time because when we had both graduated, we were thinking about marriage. She wasn't ready to get married. The thought of it kind of scared her because she wanted to go see what life had to offer. And so I would say maybe like a year after college, we broke up. And again, like that experience sent me into a pretty big spiral. And this one was the toughest one because this experience is what happened. This experience is what led to my gambling addiction,
Mm-hmm.
which is the inspiration for the book. And we can go into that a little bit shortly. But yeah, it's just I went from a poor experience and then I got out of it, kind of, pushed myself and got over it, and then went through another, breakup, and then this time like stumbled down into a big spiral down into depression.
Hmm. So wow. So after you broke up, or after you guys both broke up, it was a year after college. What I mean, I guess like you were working at the time. I guess how did that transition into gambling? Like right after, instead of going out on a Friday night, you would
Right.
head to the casino.
No, so I didn't really play cards. My addiction was around sports betting.
Oh, okay.
So here's a story, right? I had a brother growing up, and he's kind of the black sheep of the family. And while I was in high school, he's an older brother of mine. Well, while I was in high school, he had a gambling addiction, and he would steal from my parents. He would steal from other siblings, and it tore our family apart. And I remember being in high school and seeing my parents, cry and fight with him. I was so angry and mad at him for what he did to our family. And it's weird because I guess when I was in after college, when I went through that breakup, maybe subconsciously I was trying to figure out like what's the most destructive thing I could do at this moment, and maybe that experience kind of led to the gambling. Part of it is because I was going through a heartbreak, and I wanted to look for an outlet. And the thing with sports betting is that I've always enjoyed watching sports, playing sports. And so when you bet on sports, right, if you're watching a football game and you
Mhm.
bet on a football game, for those 3 hours, you're occupied with the game and you're not thinking about anything else. And just like any other addiction, you go through kind of the high when you're doing it, and then when you hit rock bottom, there's like this low, right? So that's how the addiction started. And it started initially as me just trying to numb the pain of the breakup, trying to um, distract myself. But then once I got deeper and deeper into debt, it just became like this cycle of trying to get out of debt, trying to figure out a better way to get over the breakup. But for 8 years, literally, I was just struggling through this cycle of gambling and just depression.
Wow, 8 years.
8 years.
Insane. And did you during this time, like you went to death, like did you have many ups and downs, I'm assuming? Like did you ever strike it big or and then lost it all, or
It was
was
crazy,
it
right?
constant?
So I would have moments where I would win 5,000 one week, and then the next week I would lose 10,000.
Mm.
It got to a point where I didn't really care about money. Like money was just a means to gamble with, right? So you lose the whole value of the dollar. And I would say maybe in those 8 years, I probably gambled over $200,000 and lost $200,000. And it's so like looking back, it's weird because if you knew me back then, you would never suspect I had this problem, right? In the daytime I was a tech professional. I had a great 9 to 5 job that paid well, but on the weekends I would just be so isolated. I would stay home. I wouldn't go out with my friends, and all I do is I would just bet all day long, and I would become so addicted to it that it really took over my life.
Mhm.
And it's not to say that I didn't try to stop, because I tried many times, but I didn't really get the help I needed. I always thought I could beat it on my own, but I couldn't. And it's just such a vicious cycle where you go through debt, you're gambling, you lose all your money, so you stop gambling, and then maybe 6 months later, you're back on your feet again because you can save some money, but then you get back into gambling. And I got to a point where I was really depressed, and I constantly thought about suicide because I just hated who I was, and I felt like I was that failure that my dad saw.
Mhm. And it's just crazy because you're not only gambling your money, but you're not even gambling time. You're losing like your precious years
Right.
of your 20s and 30s. But I guess well, mostly your 20s because there's only 8 years. But I guess going forward, knowing because it's just so strange because those listening might have an Asian friend who in high school was, the typical like 4.0, like, or not 4.0, but good, straight, very like normal Asian person who predict is gonna have a good like rest of future. But it just goes to show how you never know how things will turn out, moving forward. So I guess through that college experience and through these gambling like hardships and struggles, like how did you get out of that slump, or how did you get out of that addiction to finally letting go of the past and changing your life?
So if you can imagine just dealing with any kind of problem for 8 years, right? Um, it was a struggle because I wanted to stop and I wanted to get out of my life. I wanted to be better, but I was also in debt because of the gambling,
Mhm.
and I didn't know how else to pay off my debt but to gamble more, which is like backwards thinking, right?
Wait,
But
did you have a girlfriend during this 8 years?
I did. I had some girlfriends, and
Mhm.
they knew about it, but it's just trying to get me to get help was such a struggle for them, and it was such a strain on the relationship. Um, but yeah, looking back, like it's kind of even hard for me to talk about it. I get choked up because I just when I think about it, I think about like a lot of pain and a lot of like self hatred. But what really got me help was when I finally, so I'm engaged today, right? So when I finally met my fiance 3 years ago, and I was 32, and I had reached the point where I honestly believed, like before I met her, I honestly believed that I would eventually kill myself because I had been struggling with gambling for so long. I had been struggling with addiction for so long and depression. And I thought that if I couldn't get better, that eventually I'd kill myself because I just hated who I was. I hated the feeling that every day I woke up, I was such a failure in life.
Hmm.
And when I met her, and it wasn't easy in the beginning because I tried to hide it from her. Eventually, she found out, and we had a lot of arguments. And I remember one specific argument. I felt like if I didn't do something about it, she would leave. So I finally got help. I went to go see a therapist,
Hmm.
and the state actually pays for your therapy session if you have a problem with gambling. So I went through 3 months of therapy, got a lot better then, but I was still in debt. I was still in debt like 60,000. And so, stop gambling is one thing. Now, how do you get out of debt? That's another.
But you were working your tech
So
job,
I
is
was
that
working.
correct?
I was working my tech job, but again, like when you're working and you have bills to pay, it's hard to save money.
Exactly.
And so that kind of created this necessity for me to be an entrepreneur and go out there and hustle. And so I had to think of ways to like get out of debt faster by just working at it instead of gambling. And one of the first things I did was I just started to learn about digital marketing and SEO and SEM and start to help small businesses like dentists or doctors or any kind of small businesses that maybe need help with promoting their business online. Start to reach out and doing more cold calling and just starting to just figure out the other part of my life, right?
Hmm. And do you think that if you didn't have that your fiance and you didn't have a therapist, you wouldn't be like where you are today?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, it's no there's no surprise, right? Like we all have
Okay.
problems, we all have issues, some more than others. But I guess the advice I could give to your audience is that you know don't think that you're alone, and don't think that you need to do this by yourself.
Hmm.
Whatever you're struggling with, it could be personal issues, it could be financial. Go get help, and go talk to someone about it. I always thought that being, a smart guy, I could do these things on my own, but I couldn't. And it's
Yeah.
obviously after 8 years and losing $200,000, I couldn't. But it
Hmm.
wasn't until I got help that I finally started to fulfill, my potential and started to being an entrepreneur, or started to just go out there and doing things and started to build the life I wanted to live.
Hmm. Well, just it's not a real situation, but what if someone's listening and they're thinking like, I don't have anyone to turn to. Like my parents don't understand me, my teachers don't understand me. I don't have anyone to like turn to, and they feel more alone. I guess who do you turn to help in that time?
So when I was going through the gambling, I didn't tell anybody, right? Especially not my parents, because they had gone through that problem with my brother, and I didn't want to put them
Uh,
through that same experience again. Especially when they look at me as being like the chosen one, right?
mhm,
So I really didn't have a lot of people to talk to, but I would say that you just need one person, right? If as long as you're not alone and you have that one person there that's gonna listen and support you, that's all you need. So if you don't think you can talk to your parents or people at school, there's a lot of resources online to help you to find that community of people who will support you and who will understand. And again,
mhm.
you just need one person because that makes all the difference.
Yeah. Well, your life has been through many ups and downs with college, with gambling, with a lot of the other different hardships in your book that you mentioned. I guess, how are you today? Like, just want to ask you a question. Like, how are you right now?
I'm happy. I'm very
Good.
very happy. It's so when I started to do consulting and trying to get out of debt, I paid off $60,000 worth of debt in about 15 months, which is amazing.
Mhm.
And I remember the day I became financially free, it felt so weird because for 8 years I was so used to beating myself up. I was so used to just hating who I was. And the day I became debt free, I couldn't exactly accept it. It just felt weird. It felt like being in prison for 10 years and then now you're finally free and trying to adapt to the world. But yeah, that first like couple months, I really didn't know what to do with my life. And then I started to just meeting people who were hustlers like yourself, meeting people who are entrepreneurial, finding mentors, just trying to find people who I wanted to be like. And from that experience, I became very involved in a lot of different activities that led me to become an entrepreneur, led me to doing Culture Summit. And today I'm really happy. I mean, life isn't perfect, but life's never going to be perfect. It's just whatever you make of it.
Exactly. Well, I'm so glad that you share your story because you're so vulnerable and so honest and open. I know that anyone listening can be like, I might not have the exact problems you have, Hung, but I do have problems in my life where I need help on. I need to reach out to people who could help me or who like really care and appreciate me. I guess if someone's listening and they have bigger problems about personal issues or professional issues or money issues, on top of reaching for help, is there anything else that you would? I know in your subtitle you said "let go of the past." Like, do you want to talk about that and how much that letting go of the past has helped you?
Right. So during those 8 years that I struggled with gambling, I really hated myself. And I always kept thinking, if I didn't get caught up in gambling, my life would be this way, right? My life would be so much better. I would be so much further ahead of where I was. And I felt like had I just not got caught up with gambling, I could be so much more. But that was just me living in the past, holding on to the past. And I couldn't let it go until I got better and I got help. And once I got to a point where I was, doing therapy and I got out of debt, then I felt like it's okay to let go now, right? It's okay to accept the past mistakes and to look towards the future. Like there's no way you can go back and try to make it for lost time. That's how it is, right? Time is time. But what you could do is you can make the most of the time you have now, which is what I'm doing today. And I would say that for anyone who's going through problems, especially if you're dealing with depression and suicide, you should definitely get help. And I'm pretty happy that I'm seeing people like Tom Ferriss talk about suicide. He's someone I really admire, and I feel like more entrepreneurs should talk about that because we all go through problems, especially if you're an entrepreneur. There's a lot at stake on the line. And we live in this bubble where people feel like they always have to be crushing it, but the truth is not everyone's crushing it. In fact, like not a majority of people I would say isn't crushing it. And so the more
the people who are crushing it, they don't want to share that they're actually like miserable.
Right. So the more open and vulnerable we could be, like the better everyone else can be for it, right? Just by sharing your story, which is what I'm doing with you today.
And I do agree with you on how people think like suicide is like taboo. I actually encourage people to talk about mental health or suicide or depression because it's very important issues that they need to be talked about more often. So Hung, this has been amazing. I know that you have so many more hardships and failures that you mentioned in your book. Start over, but how can readers find your book and find out more about you?
Sure. So I have a newsletter. If they want, they can sign up at missionandpossible.com. And if they want to learn more about who I am and what I do, feel free to check out culturesummit.co.co.
Well, cool. Hung, this has been amazing, man. I'm so happy that you came on and shared your story.
Awesome. Really excited to have done this with you, Tam, and keep doing what you're doing, man. You are a big inspiration, and I wish I had the same balls at 19.
Hung, I appreciate the comment, man. And I'm learning from people who like yourself is saying that if I can give advice to my younger self, I would do X, Y, and Z. And I'm actually listening to that advice. Like right now, I'm listening to your advice, and I want to take it and better my life. So Hung, thank you for sharing everything. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Tam. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to Outside of the Classroom. Go ahead and go to www.outsideoftheclassroom.com/podcast to see all the show notes and resources.